Hello and welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering each and every episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Vanessa.
Vanessa, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty okay. How are you?
I'm okay. You know, I feel like we haven't talked in a little bit, so it'll be good to record this episode and kind of catch up while we do, I guess. I don't know how much I have to say about this one in particular, so I'm very interested in how our discussion will go.
Yeah, it was a short, quick, fun little episode, this one.
I have some thoughts, but we'll get into them more as we go. So for now, Vanessa, why don't you explain what this episode was?
This episode was called Requiem for a Lightweight. So in this episode, when a nurse, Hawkeye and Trapper are both really interested in pursuing, she's actually transferred to a different unit. And to get her back, they have to win this crazy boxing match. So it's really fun.
I wasn't super into this one.
Really?
I'm very curious what your kind of thoughts were, but I didn't quite, for lack of a better word, vibe with this one, you know?
Yeah.
When I first watched this, months or 2 years ago at this point, I remember this being the first episode that I really kind of tuned out of. Before I get into more of a negative territory, why don't you explain what are some things that you liked about this one?
So I don't have too much to say about this episode. I think that I actually said in my notes when I was watching it, this really follows the typical 1970s, just sitcom, cutesy, funny humor that was kind of pervasive for all sitcoms at the time, I feel. Not a lot of plot happened, not too much controversy, nothing, really crazy. But I wanted to note that for me, watching this episode, it's really funny to go back and see how lighthearted these episodes were. I think the whole show is pretty much lighthearted. Overall, it's pretty lighthearted. But going back, you can really see how the show was more of a sitcom at this time. I think I mentioned that in in a few episodes back, but this was truly sitcom territory here. And it's funny to see it now.
I think that was my kind of major issue with it. I know we're very early on in the show, so it's still kind of finding its footing and finding its identity. But this in particular, this story felt just kind of, it could happen in any older sitcom. It didn't really have to be about these characters. Even kind of the boxing match to get her back to the MASH unit, you could see that as a different show being oh, well, I want to win this boxing match to impress her. Obviously, the kind of way that the girl is treated in this one is kind of dated, but what kind of makes it uninteresting is that the girl isn't even that interesting either. She's just kind of cute and new, so they're oh, I want to hang out with her for to keep it PG.
Yeah.
And I like this one still. I wasn't hot on it, but still some good lines and good jokes in there.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Even at its most kind of uninteresting for me, still, pretty solid television for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm on board with that analysis.
Just to kind of showcase what I thought was really fun, there were some good lines in this one. For example, at the beginning, when they're going to see this nurse, and she's packing up to leave, Hawkeye says, "Darling, packing is for leaving. To stay, you have to unpack."
Yeah.
And I thought that was incredible. I was whoa, that's a good line. It's hard to explain because I'm not Alan Alda and I can't deliver it like Alan Alda. But I so many good lines in this one. When they're preparing for the boxing match and they're telling stories of the heavyweight guy and they're oh, he punched a Jeep, and Trapper just responds Hawkeye, this guy can knock out a Jeep.
Yeah.
Full of weird lines like that.
That's so funny that you bring that up too, because I was just thinking about that too. This the subtle humor is really what I love about this show and sitcoms in particular, is that these aren't super funny moments. They're not you're not gonna belly laugh at these stupid one-liners, but it's so funny, and it's like the wit is there, and it really is what I love about just about this show and sitcoms in general. My favorite line and what made me think of this is when they're introducing the boxing match. Father Mulcahy introduces the boxing match between this huge guy and Trapper, and he says, weighing 175 pounds, speaking about Trapper, all of it heart. And I was just like, that's just so it made me chuckle, and I just love that.
This show has really nice, modern feeling, kind of like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel kind of one-liners to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing kind of in that vein that I wanted to bring up, because I was actually like paying attention to the credits this episode, and in the opening credits, it's like produced by Gene Reynolds, and then like executive script consultant Larry Gelbart. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, in the 1970s, they didn't quite have, like, showrunners yet, or, like, how we kind of produce TV now. So it's just interesting the kind of wording that they had to come up with for the guy that's kind of in charge of our show and how it's written is executive script consultant, or like executive script revision consultant. It was like a very specific term that I've never seen anywhere else, because I'm so used to like shows now where it's just like the show's run by Vince Gilligan or whatever, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually didn't notice that. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I just always knew that in my head it was like, oh, those are the showrunners, not thinking that like that they weren't considered the showrunners probably at that time. That's really funny.
They didn't quite have that system in place. Like the idea of the TV show being an artistic expression of its creator is still a relatively new thing. Having your head writer have this very specific title where it's like he's not running the show, but he edits their scripts to make them all sound like his voice. It's something that I find very fascinating when you go back and they're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we run a TV show and make it personal to us? And I think those one-liners are an excellent kind of example of it, because it feels like a guy who's just good at writing those kind of jokes, reworking things to have it have this kind of same tone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's really interesting that you noticed that. I just completely never even thought about that.
Because I'm a nerd who pays attention to credits.
I do think that it's funny that MASH kind of ushered in that like golden age of television kind of thing. I don't know, like, I don't know the specific dates or whatever, but it was right before that, the sitcoms and the shows and stuff like that everyone talks about still. So what were your thoughts, like, to get more into the meat of the episode, what were your thoughts on the actual boxing part of it?
The boxing part was pretty fun, I will admit. Just this fact that this man is just a giant wall of meat was funny to me, and he didn't even have like a line. He was just silent, and again, for a 1970s show, how it's shot is still surprising me. Like the low angles where you can see like the ceiling. You never see the ceiling in sitcoms, just in this boxing ring, showing how huge this guy is. And their whole game for winning the boxing match is to put ether on the glove so he smells it and like passes out, but they can't do that because like Frank's a jerk and swapped out the ether for water. So the whole fight, he's not trying to actually hit him, he's just trying to get the glove near him, is like absurd. It's so bizarre.
And they even say there the General Barker is the general who is on the side of the other fighter, and he says to Henry during the fight, he's like, he said something like that's an unconventional way of fighting, because Trapper literally just has his boxing glove out trying to like shove it in the guy's face, like, smell my boxing glove, basically. And it visually on screen, it looks very funny.
It looks very bizarre. This was a pretty good episode. Like,
yeah, in hindsight,
like,
right?
Man, like, God forbid that a sitcom be carried by its jokes, Like, yeah, this didn't have, like, a deep discussion-worthy topics, but it's still, like, a pretty fun episode where you get to see the characters just kind of hang out, and cause mischief. Like, again, it would have been, like, nicer if we continued the like, noble goal that they tend to have in these first 2 episodes we talked about. Like, this one, they, forgive my French, they just want to, like, bang a nurse. Like, that's what they want to do in the episode. And I wish that it was a little stronger, like, conflict-wise, but it's fine. Like, it's a 70s sitcom.
Yeah, I'm actually going back and watching some other old sitcoms, and just like, I don't know if it's the same now because I don't typically watch I don't typically watch newer sitcoms as much, but 26 episodes for shows, like, you have to fill a lot of space. So
yeah,
this was obviously a kind of a filler episode. It wasn't really establishing anything except that Hawkeye and Trapper are kind of dogs. But I wanted to touch back on the fighting and the boxing aspect of it. I thought it was interesting that it was brought up so early in the show because it is referenced a couple of times throughout the series.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do they have multiple boxing matches?
Let me backtrack a little bit. So Father Mulcahy's in this episode, and is it actually a different actor playing Father Mulcahy than it was the first episode?
That.
Yeah. So William Christopher is Father Mulcahy. He plays him throughout the rest of the series. He's promoted to the main cast in the later episodes. I noticed it. It was really funny. In the pilot episode, the actor who plays Father Mulcahy kind of almost looks like William Christopher, and I was like, they could be like cousins. That's kind of strange. So anyway, so the boxing, in the later episodes with more of Father Mulcahy's backstory, he's very much into boxing, and I won't really spoil it, but it's a very big part of who he is. And I thought it was really cool that they established that
that he trained kids.
Yeah, and that it was already established that he knew about boxing and was a fighter. And that just goes to my also like love of this show, of course, about how the continuity is so interesting because, again, like, a lot of the times things like that are dropped. There is not much continuity in older episodes of sitcoms just because certain things just don't work out. But it was really cool to see that Father Mulcahy having fighting in his life as a big thing was established in episode 3 of the entire series. So I thought that was really cool.
I do love stuff like that as well. Like watching kind of anything where you're not expecting it to be this like ongoing storyline thing. Certain characters will have development, and then you go back and knowing their kind of backstory and like who they are better with the information from the later episodes, when you can go back and be like, oh, that's why this person acted like a jerk in their first appearance. It's because like their whole backstory. It makes the full series better when you can kind of look at a character in retrospect with everything you learn. That's cool that that's in here too. Because, in my head, every 70s sitcom, everything resets. Every, like, older sitcom, everything is kind of in a vacuum. I am very intrigued by how you say that there is this character development, and this very established component of this very minor character so far. That makes this episode cooler.
The more you know, right? The more you know, you start out you start out not really liking the episode, and then you talk about it, and you're just like, wow, I do like this episode. I did that a lot with a couple of shows. So I wanted to pivot real fast to we wanted to discuss a little bit of like the treatment of women, I guess, in this episode. I had some notes about how
welcome to our annual MASH is somewhat dated, but that's okay. Corner. Welcome. It's every episode. Maybe.
I guess it's not annual if it's every single episode, but I had really just thoughts on Margaret's character, but I wanted to know what you thought. You had actually mentioned it about the treatment of the nurse, even though I didn't think it was too bad.
Oh, no, it's not bad. It's just the fact that she's nothing. Like, there isn't a character for her. She's just, like, a cute new girl. And, like, she serves that purpose well. Like, she is cute, but, like, she doesn't have kind of anything to her to make her like an actual character, and like that's what I don't think that a modern sitcom would do, even if doing like this, oh, we have to impress her, we have to get her backstory. I think most shows would kind of try to have her be a little more complicated than just like, hey, I'm here, I'm gonna leave. Bye. And then she comes back and they're like, all right, cool. I like at the end when, you know, Hawkeye is very much the main guy, like he is the leader, and then because Trapper got beat up in this boxing match, the girl pays more attention to Trapper because of course she would, and Hawkeye is just like, oh no, I screwed up. Good bit, good ending.
It's really funny to me that you say all that, and then knowing the show, she actually comes back for most of this season, this character.
Oh, really?
So yeah, this is her
great.
first introductory episode. And she is more of Hawkeye's love interest throughout season 1. She's not in the later episodes, but just throughout this season, she's a character.
Okay.
We should actually name her. She's not an unnamed character. Her name's Lieutenant Cutler, Margie Cutler. I actually have some fun facts, but I'll wait for our little trivia section.
Okay.
My thoughts about women in this episode really kind of comes back to Margaret, and it's no secret. I love this character. And most people I feel are like, why? But so Lieutenant Cutler actually gets transferred because Margaret says that she is a distraction to the doctors. And I didn't really like how that was dealt with. Like, Margaret has a lot of hypocrisy and like kind of, I guess, like internalized sexism is what you'd call it in the earlier episodes.
Especially for the 50s.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I'm sure that's just a thing that women had to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. But it's definitely more, I guess, like insidious in this episode and earlier episodes too. But throughout the whole show, Margaret does not like when the doctors go after her nurses. Like, she definitely doesn't like it. And it's attributed a lot to, again, this hypocritical kind of like internalized sexist aspect of her character. She's sleeping with a married man and she is carrying on an affair and stuff like that. But this does get better throughout the series, I would say. And I thought it was interesting, this one joke where Trapper calls her Frank's bag. And
yes, I noted that too. I was like, oh, Vanessa's gonna have some thoughts on that.
I didn't think it was like, I mean, obviously, like, don't call women someone's bag, but it was funny. Yeah, absolutely. So that also reminded me that Margaret does keep her relationships really private, or at least she tries to, I would say. Like, it's kind of like an unspoken secret that, everyone knows that she's sleeping with Frank and stuff like that. But she does try to keep her relationships private with Frank and also in later episodes when she's with other people. And I think that without even meaning to, that one joke kind of attributes to why, because she knows that, when you're sleeping with someone as a woman in the 1950s in the army, you're not just a woman sleeping with someone in the army, you're someone's bag. You know what I mean? So I thought that was like me kind of like reading into it a little bit. But the other thing was that Margaret very clearly takes the army very seriously. Like, this is her career, this is her job. She obviously doesn't like that Hawkeye and Trapper don't take the army seriously and are very unprofessional, and she doesn't like that causes her nurses to be like human, but like in her mind unprofessional. And of course, in the army, even now, there is not a compulsive draft for women. So these women, these nurses that are here, signed up voluntarily. Like, they wanted to go, they wanted to do this work. And to have these doctors take, just a complete, like, these two goober doctors just completely throw everything to the wind. Like, obviously she takes that very personally and wants her nurses to do well because they signed up to do well. And you don't really see it in this episode, but you do see it in later episodes, I will say. And again, not to excuse the hypocrisy or the sexism or anything like that, but Margaret's character does progress throughout the series.
You always mention that. I know that you love Margaret and that you hate her nickname and all this stuff, and like, I'm still like not sold on Margaret like at all. Like, she's just kind of there right now. So I love hearing you talk about how this character's got depth, and it's like what I said a little bit earlier with having a character's development, how you can look back on their earlier actions, be like, I understand them better now.
Yeah, and you definitely, with like looking back on the characters, you definitely see that with Margaret, I feel. Again, it's hard with this show because there are so many episodes, but you really do get it, a lot of character development and continuity and stuff later in the show, which I think is just great. Like, that's just good writing, I feel.
Yeah, and I think especially rare for this time period too, because you don't see a lot of that even now in like your basic sitcoms. Obviously in the more like prestige-y stuff, they kind of build their brand on everything's important and everything's a grand thing, but you know, you don't watch Big Bang Theory for like the plot. It's just like there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very excited to see where all these characters go, because I'm sure they're going to grow, and I'm sure the show is going to take some wild turns that I can only imagine right now. I can't wait, honestly.
So I wanted to just do a little bit of quick trivia. It's mostly about the actors in the show. So Sorrel Brook played General Barker in this episode, and Sorrel Brook was actually a Korean War veteran, which I had no clue. And he comes back and reprises his role in the next episode. I don't particularly recall it, but I do know he comes back. He's actually best known for his role as Boss Hogg in The Dukes of Hazzard, which was another old show.
Everybody's favorite show about Southern boys. I've honestly never seen an episode.
Me neither. But MASH is really well known for introducing actors and actors and actresses during that time period of like the 70s, 80s, 90s that made their like almost like their first appearances on the show as guest stars when they were first starting out. Even though this Sorrel Brook was already an established actor, it's just interesting that this is gonna be one of the first like, you know, guest stars of the long list of many, many stars of that era that to come on the show.
I know we have Ron Howard coming up. I'm very excited. I love Ron Howard in all forms. Modern day Ron Howard, teenager Ron Howard. Give it to me all. I love that
baby
little
Opie
lad.
Ron Howard. Oh, the best.
Yeah, boy.
So, and then the next one actually going along with this is Marcia Strassman. She plays Lieutenant Margie Cutler. Strassman is best known for her role as Julia Cotter in Welcome Back, Cotter, which is another sitcom, another old sitcom that I've seen episodes of that I enjoy. It's really old
Does
though.
that have John Travolta?
It did, I'm pretty sure, yeah. It was
nice.
like John Travolta's sitcom, yeah. So, and another fun little fact about her is that she was born in NYC, but she was raised in Passaic, New Jersey, and Ethan and I are both Jersey trash, so we've got a Jersey girl on the show.
Boy.
Love it so much.
Love it too. Fun fact for everyone outside of New Jersey, every actor you ever liked is secretly from New Jersey. Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep, you name them, we got them. It's more than just Danny DeVito and Kevin Smith. Everybody's secretly from New Jersey.
Yeah, or like lived in New Jersey for an extended period of time. Like so many people. We're cool, guys.
It's
we really are.
Jersey's better than the jokes make it out. I mean, it's still not fantastic, but you know, a little bit of a better rap than people are led to believe.
Absolutely.
So Vanessa, with our little New Jersey rant out of the way, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
I just that this episode was really cute. I liked the humor. It made me think about why I love sitcoms so much, and this was definitely one of the episodes.
I agree. I mean, like I said, not one that I loved, but still had good lines. A lot of good lines in this one that I jotted down. So, you know, still a good time. And with everything you mentioned of how all these people, how this episode actually establishes a bit, it's very interesting to see how this one will impact the series going forward. Even though it kind of feels like, oh, well, we just need to have an episode here. So with all that said, I'd like to give thanks to Jacob Friere-Balco for being our technical consultant, Vanessa's sister, Melissa, for our cover art, and of course, our lovely listeners. Still don't have music. Music is hard, but hopefully when this goes out, we'll have a link to whatever track we use as our theme song in the description of this episode. And you can follow us on social media at Valiantly Off Balance, and me personally on Instagram and Twitter, if you so prefer, at Ethan Was Cool.
And you can follow me on Instagram at Unvanessary. If anyone needs it, just find it through Ethan.
Yeah, we have links. Just search. You can find us. So until next time, remember that a horseshoe and a boxing glove is a bit gauche, but ether is subtle. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.